For me, like values are really important. Like we talked
Mm-hmm.
about, like what are the things that you really wanted at the core and center, right? Um, and I think my values are my personal values, my business values are like joy, authenticity, community, and equity. Like those are my ish. I call it Jace. For you, what are some of your values that you like that kind of keep you aligned, that kind of keep you grounded? Like what are those values that you have for your business, maybe individually? What's good, y'all? It is your boy Jonathan Dumas, and we are back with another episode of Highly Visible and a Little Misunderstood podcast, the show where we talk to people we see every day because we don't know what we miss until we miss them. A little throwback for y'all from the Real Talk to Dumas podcast. I'm bringing that catchphrase back. Anyways, today we're going to be sitting down with my friend Grace Young Foster. She's the founder of the Inclusion Initiative, and Grace is doing some incredible work supporting alumni from the foster care system. And trust me, this conversation is going to hit you right in the feels. If you're not familiar with the foster care system at all, after you age out, that's it. There's no real support. There's other nonprofits out there, but there's not a ton of support. And so Grace is really trying to change that. She's trying to create like an alumni system of professionals to provide that mentor all these alumni in the system, because our foster care system is not good in the US. So I'm really excited for y'all to hear from her. But before we get into those gems that Grace is going to drop, make sure you catch Ashmi Patel's episode from last week. If you didn't catch it, she talked about and broke down how she's supporting millennials in reimagining a life of space, ease, and choice through her coaching practice. It was really great. She did a little coaching with me as well. It was really, really fun. Now to some quick logistics before we dive into my conversation with Grace. We're not going to have any hidden in plain sight story this week. I was a little tired. I was studying for exam, took the exam, passed the exam. Quick logistics, y'all. We are trying to build a movement here, trying to build an email list, trying to get subscribers up. I want to invite you into it anyway. So what we are actually offering, folks, is if you sign up for our email list right down below, where you'll get notified when an episode drops, any cool stuff that we're doing. We'll send you a free sticker, and I don't have them on me, but I promise you we have them. They look something like this. Boom. We'll send that to you free of charge. All you gotta do is sign up for our email list. So check out that in the show description. Well, that's it for me. Like I said, there's no hidden in plain sight video this week, our story this week. So here's the conversation with Grace. Let's go. So Grace, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm super excited to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks so much, Jonathan, for having me. I always enjoy conversations with you. I'm really excited about this.
Yes, this is so good. Yeah, we little context for everybody else. We met in Carissa Begonia's business entrepreneurial cohort. It's now ready. Hold on. Leap to Liberation. But I was in the Ready to Leap. Wait, ready? I was in the Ready to Leap, and you were in the Ready to Launch.
Yeah.
Yeah. No
That's
lie.
right.
I always got them confused. I always switched them in my mind. It's all good. So I'm really excited to like have you on, talk about what you got going on as we get into this, dive deeper into this series. So I would love for you to just introduce yourself, share who you are, maybe the work that you're doing. Let's start there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Grace Young Foster. I am the founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative, which is working to close the opportunity gap for transracial adoptees and foster care alumni in our professional spaces.
I love it. So for you, all right, so I did a little peek in the bio and all that stuff. So you have like an extensive like background in nonprofit orgs and different things like that. Like what made you like launch into like doing your own thing, especially in given like this niche of a field?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll back up and share that entrepreneurship was like bottom of my list. I did not envision myself as an entrepreneur. I did not think of myself as someone that was a movement builder or someone that could really have influence in this space, in the startup ecosystem, in the tech ecosystem, in the DEI ecosystem. So I always thought of myself as more of a supporter and more of a person that would be a fit to elevate others. And it kind of plays into this whole mindset that we're going to talk about later as, people of color, and especially in certain sectors, right, where you're not the dominant in that space and you don't really see others like you. And so that really does shape your perception, right, of what you're capable of, what you could aspire to be, and what you reach for. Not even to mention, right, what we're supported in. Yeah. So when we don't have others around us that reflect us, it's hard to see yourself in those positions of leadership, of influence, of change making. So I say all that because, again, entrepreneurship was the last thing I thought I would do. And I had, started a very non-traditional career because of my background as a transracial adoptee, as someone who had experienced the foster care system. I was placed into a home, a situation, a community that didn't reflect me at all. And really, the overarching theme, right, was I was to assimilate and blend in there versus me as an individual with all I had to give was accepted, valued, and, included in the spaces that I was in. So because of the mindset, right, I had to blend in, I had to fit in, I had to be what others were telling me I should be. I never strived, right, to be more than that. And so I kind of just took any job that I could get. And that started me out in the restaurant space, in the retail space. And from there, I built a career in corporate America in sales and business development, and did that for a few years. And then transitioned, like many folks, we all transition careers at one point in time. And I decided to transition into the social impact space. So I went into the nonprofit sector. I left the Midwest. I moved to DC. I thought I was going to help change the world in the nonprofit space. And, obviously I had transferable skills, sales and business development. When you apply them to fundraising, it's pretty impactful and powerful. So I built my career here in the DC area in the nonprofit space, fundraising for organizations, for these mission-driven organizations, and was quite successful, but not as successful as I thought I would be. And so that all, through a myriad of things and a lot of nuances that we'll talk about, led me to entrepreneurship.
I love that. Yeah, I have so many follow-up questions because it's so interesting the overlap that I've felt, just like not exploring my own racial identity more particularly, and in my own like experience in like predominantly white spaces, and like just like taking the jobs that like I could get, or like we think you'd be a good fit for that, so you're always like trying to navigate that. Not correlate, not like making a direct link to being a transracial adoptee or anything like that, but it's just like the parallels that I'm seeing between that. It's just like, it really just emphasizes the I don't know, I guess the influence or even like the losses that we could feel when we're not like, our racial identity is not like fostered or cared for and encouraged or or even seen, like really even seen. So
Right.
no, like that's really wild. So okay, so you decided to start the Inclusion Initiative. Tell us more about that, because I know that the impact, the work is so necessary. So I used to be a HR recruiter for a very short time, I'm at a nonprofit like um,
Oh,
foster
you
care
were?
organization. Yeah. So
Wow.
I was recruiting like a lot of the folks for the group homes that worked in the group homes, and then some of the what were the other positions? Caseworkers, different things like that, visitation, all of those things. So I'm somewhat familiar with it. I only did it for like about a year, but
Okay.
yeah, but it was very very interesting. So
Yeah,
yeah.
you got a glimpse inside that world, and you really saw. I think if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you saw just some of the inequities in the system, and you
Mm.
saw some of the challenges, right? Of especially in the recruiting part of it to ensure that the kids that you're supporting were really getting the help that they needed.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And also just like the view of these white people thinking that they're
Mm-hmm.
doing, God's work, but I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
you literally like you don't see I don't know, you don't see them as kids, you see them as like your own like way of feeling white saviorism. Like you feel like so good
Yes.
about yourself for the work that you're doing. And I'm like, you think you're telling them what they need, and you're like, you're not even talking to them about what they need. You're telling them that this is
Yeah.
their home. It's like, no, I don't know. It just made me feel a little icky sometimes because I'm like, you don't even
Mm-hmm.
know. You don't even know what
Yeah.
you're talking about. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
let's dive into that a little bit
Well,
because it
let's do it. I love
obviously
it.
it
Yeah.
influences, right, why I'm building the inclusion initiative. So
Yes.
when I first joined the nonprofit sector, I had just a really unique perspective in some of the organizations that I work for because I had such a unique background
Hmm.
and the all of my identities um, were reflecting right these lived experiences of the communities that we were serving.
Hmm.
However, many organizations that do really excellent they do excellent work in the space,
Hmm.
but there's very few that have leaders running these organizations that actually have lived experience
Hmm.
of the
Hmm.
communities that they're serving. It makes a huge difference. And it further, can marginalize those communities
Hmm.
when you have, for example, white people, right, who are not people of color, who are telling youth of color in a foster care system what they should have, what they should think, what should they do when they don't actually have those lived experiences as
Hmm.
foster youth of color living through the system in real time.
Yeah.
And it's not a problem we can fix tomorrow, but as I was working for these organizations and climbing, that nonprofit corporate ladder and raising money and really understanding how philanthropy was influencing all of this,
Hmm.
how people with money were white, and then dictating the terms, right, of what these
Hmm.
communities received and how they got support and how the organizations were run, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just this big systematic
Hmm.
structural issue that nonprofits have been based on for decades and decades.
Hmm.
And so the more that I was really seeing these systems for what they were,
Hmm.
and I'm only going to speak for myself, right?
Yeah.
Because there are people in the space that don't feel this way. They have the right to their own opinions. But in my experience, as someone that was trying to raise money to support really marginalized communities, like you said, there was an ick factor and it was
Hmm.
really bugging me. And on top of it all, myself as a person of color, very talented, very skilled, very impactful in the organizations that I work for. Um, but right, I had this non-traditional background where I didn't, because of my history and background as a transracial adoptee and someone that had been in the foster care system. And then, of course, as a person, right, that, there are adoptees that have fantastic, super amazing experiences. There are some that have polar opposite. Mm-hmm. There are some that have middle ground experiences. Well, for me personally, I didn't get to retain and carry on family support and family connection. So, my adoption experience just led me to a place in my life where I became very isolated and siloed and didn't have that family support that, a lot of people just take for granted, right? People that are born into their families and they have their mom and dads and siblings and uncles and aunts and grandparents and first and second, third, fourth, fifth cousins, on and on it goes, right? When you think about the extensive network that gives you from the very beginning of your life, it's kind of amazing. And I like to call this, your legacy network. This is your legacy network. Mm-hmm. And as you grow and start pursuing school and job opportunities, right, this legacy network is really the first place where a lot of people get their opportunities. Mm-hmm. They get to understand what it means to be in the workforce. They understand what white collar jobs are versus blue collar. They understand what internships are, all of that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any of that. Yeah. I'm working at McDonald's and like Abercrombie and Fitch. Yeah. Like just trying to put food on the table for myself and figure out how I'm going to pay rent and all of that. So, all that to say, I didn't get to start with this great legacy network where I got these opportunities upon opportunities upon opportunities because, my dad knows somebody at X company that can give me an internship or whatever it is. And so my resume looked weird. Yeah. It looked weird. Yeah. And it was not traditional. And so when you come into a sector like the nonprofit sector that really is built on legacy networks, people that are in positions of power, I should say many people that are in positions of power in the nonprofit sector, not all, of course. A lot of it has to do with the connections that you have, the network that you have. And because I was essentially a no one coming into the space, but really aspiring and trying, right, to gain these leadership positions because I was qualified. Mm-hmm. I was absolutely qualified. And I had the skill and talent and the drive, all of that. But no matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I worked, no matter the goals and metrics that I smashed, out of the park, it never was quite enough, right? I could never quite break these ceilings that are there for people of color, for Asian women, for women. Yeah. The list goes on. Yeah. And it took me a while to realize that there are a few things going on, right? There is me as a person of color experiencing the things that a lot of people of color go through. There's me as a transracial adoptee and foster care alumni who had really a broken experience where I don't have, right, that legacy network that helped me in my young adulthood, in my career journey. Yeah, yeah. There is also the fact that because I'm a transracial adoptee and I was put into a white community, home with white parents, I had rejected my race and my ethnicity for a long time. And I rejected that. I internalized that racism towards myself, especially. Yeah. But then anything that would associate me with being Asian. And that filtered into all aspects of my life. It filtered into the friends that I chose. It filtered into the jobs and communities that I chose to live in and work in. And even it filtered into me preventing myself from building relationships, professional, personal, otherwise, with people who were Asian. Yeah. It's like ridiculous It's
Yeah.
ridiculous. And I am so ashamed that it took me so long to get past all of that. But I also recognize, right, it's not my fault. It is a system, a culture of all the things that I was placed in and went through that I didn't choose, right? Because when you're an adoptee and you're a foster care alum, you don't choose these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was those years and years of being told these narratives of, your value lies if you behave in the dominant culture way, which is white culture for me.
Yeah.
And in order to succeed, right, you have to mimic and assimilate to this white culture that's the dominant culture in your space. So, for me, all of these things added up to finally. I have a point. I
Please,
promise I'm
no,
getting there.
it's all good.
But in 2020, right, our country felt the weight of everything, just everything happening. I don't have to explain it to the audience.
No, they know.
But I want to call out specifically, right, the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and all the others that we don't list, like, right, the murders of Black people that were finally being nationally talked about, not just once, but like an ongoing conversation, right? That really helped our country just stop and listen and try and learn and try and change behaviors and try and change the narrative and try to really recognize that Black people really matter in our country and they're suffering and they're being killed. And this is a systemic issue across all different minority groups in our country that we are not valued here, right? And for me in this moment in time, it made me really reflect on my own internal racism that I had towards myself and towards other Asian people. And it helped me really change, right, how my behaviors, my thought patterns, my mindset about how I valued myself, how I valued my community, et cetera, et cetera. But all the while, Jonathan, like I was searching, right, because I knew I was a part of this conversation. I knew that as an Asian person, as someone that had experienced what I did in the foster care system, in the adoption system, like I knew that I had a perspective that was important. And I was searching and searching, right, for all these conversations. I was searching for rooms to talk about this in. And time again, right, I didn't belong. And my story was not really understood. And I was not being included in these conversations, especially around belonging. And for a couple of years, almost 3 years, I was searching for this space, especially in the professional spaces, because I knew that I was having frustrations and challenges over climbing the corporate ladder. And to the point, Jonathan, where I went and got an MBA from a top business school. I went to NYU.
Oh, yeah.
Still can't believe that I got in, by the way, but it's an incredible program. And even after that, right, things were not really changing for me. And I'm like, hello, I'm doing everything right. I'm ticking all these boxes.
Yeah.
What is wrong? And I realized it's not with me. I was not the problem. The systems were the problem, right?
Yeah.
But I couldn't find these professional spaces where I could use my voice, where my story was heard and really welcomed, right? Where I could see people that shared my lived experiences. And for me, it came to just a point in my career where I realized, right, if I'm not finding this space and I need it, and I have all of these lived experiences to point towards, right, to why I need it and why this is important and why we need to be included in these conversations. Well, guess what? There are millions of adoptees and foster care alumni in the United States.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
guarantee you I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
And if I'm not finding these spaces, that means they're not finding these spaces.
Mm.
That is unacceptable.
Yeah.
And I have been searching for several years now, and the fact that I can't find them signals to me that there is a real market need for this. Even if it's a small niche market need,
Yeah.
this is a need because I need it.
Yeah.
And who is going to build it? I've been waiting. And I realized after my work with our cohort, with Carissa, I'm like, well, if I don't build it, it probably won't be built, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I launched my entrepreneurship journey to build the Inclusion Initiative. So I
Amazing.
promise you I get to the point.
Yeah,
There it is.
no. That's great. I mean, this is a podcast, so like the scenic route is always the better way to go. So like, yeah, you said a good amount of things there that like, just got my mind spinning. But I think the thing that like draws my attention there is like the searching part, right? Where like in 2020, a lot of folks, I'll put myself in there, even though I started like my negrescence. It's called negrescence, where you like grow into your blackness or whatever. But I think I started before then. But I think 2020 was just like such an isolated time. 2020, 2021, even up until this year, where like there is nothing else you can do but to think and see and process and ponder. And even for you, where like probably those questions were already bubbling up because you're experiencing all these things leading up to this time, but particularly in 2020, where you're like, the fuck? That's just like, what's going on? Yeah. And it's just like that searching piece, right? Where it's like, and realizing the level of like, for me, anti-blackness that I like had internalized, and for you, probably anti-Asianness that you internalized. It's really, really wild. And even the parallels that I'm seeing in my own like career journey, entrepreneurial journey is like the people that I tried to impress, the rooms that I tried to get into were like these people that were never going to accept me anyways. And I'm like exerting so much energy to like connect, to show, to prove myself, my business, my concepts, my ideas, whatever, to people that were literally never going to accept me in the first place. And so like, until like I woke up and was like, yo, you know, I gotta like realize like what's going on internally within me and like deal with this. And like the community that has always accepted me, that always loved me, even though like I was trying to figure out, there was some people that you just don't connect with, like,
Yeah.
Whatever. I've been called, Oreo, whatever. There's a lot of people that can like relate to that, which is there's layers to that, whatever. But like when I found my folks like online, when I found the people that like I connect with, well, black folks, that black community that like loved me, cared for me, and like embraced me like wholly, like it truly, truly is a game changer. And you recognize like the thing that you're building, the thing that you're designing, the creating that you're putting out into the world. Then even it's not, I don't even consider yours a small niche, right? Like I think that it's a niche that is so needed. But what you're creating, the thing that you're creating, it's just like it's needed. And so like it's so interesting how I've been meeting lots more entrepreneurs of color, black, Asian folks, that like their identities and their stories show up so in many different ways, in the work and the things that they're building and creating, and like the reasoning behind why. It's just like beautiful to me. I'm like I feel like this just feels natural. It feels real. It feels to some extent grounded in the why, and the why it's important. And I think to some extent that is also why it will be so impactful, right? And even to something that you said earlier, it's like you have white folks, or even like I've seen some black and black and brown folks, Asian folks in these positions where like they're just doing a different iteration of whiteness in those positions, and like they're still exhibiting the same amounts of harm, and to some extent even greater, because they're like perpetuating these kind of ideas of like what it is to be X, Y, and Z, or how to be in the world. And it's just whiteness, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like so harmful, so damaging. And I'm gonna call myself to the carpet here too, because like I used to do that. Like that was me. That was like, yo, why you acting that way? You need to like do this, 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 and this, and not realizing like the level of harm that I was causing, but like even level of privilege and opportunity that I had that allowed me to get in those rooms, like X,
Mm-hmm.
Y, and Z. So it's just
Yeah.
it's so interesting, and like I feel that in your story. I'm curious, like all that say, I'm curious for you, like when you were crafting even the inclusion, your business. Name the business one more time. Inclusion
The
Initiative.
Inclusion Initiative. Yep.
Okay, I almost said something else. All right, so when you're crafting the inclusion initiative, like when you're just sitting, in your room or a whiteboard or whatever you're doing, like what were the things that like you absolutely knew that needed to be like at the center of the inclusion initiative?
Number one, lived experience.
Mm,
Lived experience is so, like we talked about, right? It's often not included when things are being built for different groups of people.
mm-hmm,
And it's shifting now. Like, we're seeing more and more things that are being built or have been built that are now recognizing how important lived experience is and having those voices at the table
mm-hmm.
um, before, during, and after it's built, right?
Yeah.
But for me, because that was so missing in the professional spaces, and, I'll back up a little bit, right? When we walk into the workplace, very clear, our faces just show one
Mm-hmm.
identity or two identities,
Yeah.
whether we're male presenting, female presenting, what race we are. So those are like on our faces. What's not clear, right, are the nuances of other identities that we hold. So
Mm-hmm.
for LGBTQIA, if in my example, right, I'm a transracial adoptee. I'm
Mm-hmm.
also a foster care alumni.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't know that unless I told you.
Yeah.
And many of us in the workplace never talk about it because it's deep.
Yeah.
And it's often something that we don't want to be defined by because of
Mm.
the narratives in society about, right? When you think about foster youth, what are you thinking? You're thinking like troubled kids, kids that, are in the lowest of lows. You
Mm.
don't have like positive associations with foster youth.
Mm.
That's because of the rhetoric and narratives of society. And transracial adoptee, I'll define that for the audience because I'm sure a lot of people don't know exactly what that means, but it means when a person of one race is brought in and adopted by a family that does not reflect their race.
Mm.
In the US, typically it's showing up as people of color being adopted by white parents, but it can be Black parents adopting an Asian person. It
Mm.
can be, Asian people adopting a white person. So, that's kind of the definition. But it's
Yeah.
predominantly here in the US, white parents adopting kids of color.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also like a transnational adoptee, so intercountry. So I was
Mm.
brought from Korea into the US.
Mm.
So my cultural identity, right, was completely taken from me as well.
Mm.
But yeah, we don't talk about these things because it's not adoption, transracial adoption, foster care. Like these are not like just normal topics of conversation you just have with your friends and all of that. And depending on what your lived experience is, right, it can be extremely painful to talk about and very
Mm. Mm-hmm.
triggering. But in the workplace, right, all of these lived experiences do impact like how we show up as professionals and how we deal with things as professionals. Things like toxic bosses or feedback or or like tight deadlines on
Mm-hmm.
projects, like those can be triggering. Even friendships in the workplace, like all of that kind of stuff
Mm.
shows up in how we respond as transracial adoptees or foster care alumni, but we never are able to talk about it and show it. And so it was really important for me when building the inclusion initiative that this be a intentional network and resource hub for our community with these lived experiences, because it doesn't exist. And then also, I wanted it to be a place where we can literally close the opportunity gap. And I talk about the opportunity gap. I explained it a little bit, but right, a lot of us don't have these legacy networks that we get to just build our careers on or launch our careers from.
Yeah.
So we're building everything from scratch. And we may choose to tell parts of our story, we may not. That can hurt us or that can help us. It depends, right? And so we're piecemealing all of these things together, this network, these resources, we're piecemealing our careers together. And, in my personal experience, as I was climbing the ranks and getting manager roles and director roles and leadership roles, I had peers that were like 5 years younger than me. I had some peers that were like 10 years younger than me. And I was like, whoa. Like, I guarantee you I've like really, really had to do a lot to get here. Like, I'm not saying they didn't, right?
Yeah.
But then you layer in the things about not having family, not having network, not having community, not having financial resources, like from the age of 17, like all of these things. There's a lot more mountains that I had to climb than some others do.
Yeah.
To the point, right, where I had to go get an MBA to get the same position someone 10 years younger than me got without one.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just those examples. And I'm like, again, I am talented, I'm skilled, I've had resources, I have experience, all of this kind of stuff. And I now have a network that I have built. And if I'm still struggling like this, can you imagine the people that don't have the privileges that I have?
Yeah, yeah.
The people who are Black American, right? They're going to have some challenges that I don't have to go through as an Asian American. So I'm like, there is clearly this opportunity gap professionally that's also preventing our wealth building, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it's just perpetuating these systems of inequity over and over again. And so in building the inclusion initiative, it was very important for me to have specific resources that's going to help us close this opportunity gap for transracial adoptees and foster care alumni for the things that we go through and experience in the workplace. So those are kind of top three.
I love that. I love that too. And that's like something that I've heard like repeatedly. And I think even in our program with Carissa, she was pretty explicit about like you're entrepreneurs, you're the first, you're the only. The other, I think that's her the three O's she'd be using. And I even love that saying that she uses because it's very, very true. And I think sometimes, I'll just speak for my own self. Like, even when I'm going to use the podcast, for example, that like, it started out as like this kind of like journalistic thing of our open diary thing where like, I just wanted to have conversations with the people that were closest to me, and talk about things that like I think about, but never really like have a conversation about. And even just like that, like that's the stories that came out about that just, yeah, it really inspired me to like dig deeper in what it means. And then all of a sudden, like I'm using my story and like the things that I've navigated and worked through. And then all of a sudden, like people are resonating with that. And I'm like, oh shoot, like this is hitting home for some folks, right? Of like, having like even parts of my story, it's like, I don't know. I sometimes I kind of use my suffering as a badge of honor. And then that kind of got me some level of access, which I feel, what the hell? But like being, mom had me at 15 and like, and being the first to go to school, first to go to college, like being like exceptional in a lot of different ways. But also like talking to my mom about like those things, like what was it like for you to raise you know, 3 kids by the time you were, 23, 24, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And then exploring that and then having people tell me, oh shoot, like this, that's my story too. Or like, there's some connection to that. And so I think when there's a groundedness to our, like being the first, the only, like there is like and like even an ownership of our stories and like what we want to share, how we show up, or even like that, even being our central why, even if it's not explicitly shared out.
Hmm.
Because for me, I just really wanted to explore like these conversations and being able to like talk about things in a nuanced way and like be curious, like ultimately just be like curious. Um, and
Yep.
like how that's resonated and built something around curiosity, around around figuring out how to like do life and the world a little bit better by understanding and learning about people more. Like that's my why, and it started with like like those kind of conversations. But it's just so interesting. Like that, a lot of the entrepreneurs of color like that I talk to that are like that's their story. Like it's really really
Yeah.
influenced by like who they are, and kind of like the things that they've experienced throughout their life. Um, so I okay for me, like values are really important. Like we talked
Hmm.
about, like what are the things that you really wanted at the core and center, right? Um, and I think my values are my personal values, my business values are like joy, authenticity, community, and equity. Like those are my ish. I call it Jace. For you, what are some of your values that you like that kind of keep you aligned, that kind of keep you grounded? Like what are those values that you have for your business, maybe individually? What are yours?
Yeah. Definitely at the top is equity.
Mm.
It's the whole purpose of, my business is top line is equity for our
Mm.
communities, but that, I want it to uh, have, many of our businesses, of the organizations that are working in this space, right? We all want equity for our communities.
Mm.
And the more that people like you and I and, our friends who are entrepreneurs and, the organizations that are doing good work in this space, the more that we do it together
Mm-hmm.
and talk about this and message this together, the more it will become reality for our future generations. And, I have a little daughter. She's almost 2. So
Wow.
cute and so stubborn. But when I when I see her future, right? And when I look at my future, I try and imagine what I would have wanted for 20-year-old Grace. And I
Mm-hmm.
think about her. I'm like, well, the future we're building right now, like the work we're doing right now, that's going to be her future when she's 20.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, for me, the future I was seeing was not okay.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It was not okay. And I want her to have equity as an Asian American person.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one. Integrity is huge, right? And I would also say, my organization is called the Inclusion Initiative because I want us to all include each other in these conversations. A lot of people, they ask me, like, why are you doing it for foster care alumni? Like, why not just adoptees? You're adopted, like
Mm.
they don't always like put two and two together. I have lived experiences both, but the
Mm.
real reason I'm doing both communities that seem separate is
Mm-hmm.
because they go through very similar experiences. But
Mm.
foster youth, especially foster youth of color, are way less likely to be adopted, to have a
Mm.
permanent home.
Mm.
And so, they're ripped away from everything they've known at maybe they're babies, maybe they're older. A lot of them tend to be older. And I don't have to explain a lot of this to you, right? Because you worked in the system for a little bit, you know this.
Yeah.
But they are taken from their families, their communities, their cultures as well, and placed into homes where they just don't ever belong and they're never accepted.
Mm-hmm.
And as a transracial adoptee, like, that's really what I felt. And I actually had a lot of siblings, both adopted and fostered. There were nearly 20 of us
Mm,
of all different races and backgrounds. And so I saw firsthand the foster care system and the
mm,
adoption system and the parallels and the similarities, and just how awful things can really be in both systems, how good things can also be in both systems. But we share parallel storylines. And a lot of us, I think, can get really siloed, right, in the main identity that we think about every day.
mm.
And we forget that we're more connected than we think we are, right? So
Yeah.
we as people of color, we're super connected. Even though you are
Yep.
Black, I am Asian, we're still really connected in
Mm,
some of our shared experiences, because the underlying themes and issues are really similar, right?
mm-hmm.
White supremacy, oppression, all of these things.
Yeah.
Um, and so for me, it's like with the inclusion initiative, like that inclusion is so important to me, that we
Mm,
remember that we are all a part of this change, and we all have a place to be included, because we share more than we think. We're less
mm,
different than we think. Um, and for me, these two particular communities just, didn't have a voice yet. So I
yeah.
really wanted to include them in this initiative exclusively, but it's to ultimately to foster that sense of belonging that everyone
I,
deserves.
I
And
love
so those are
that.
like really key values for me.
Yeah. And what's interesting is when I first heard you put this out here, like I was like, I've never heard anything like this before, and like anything and everything I can do to support it is just like I want to, because it's so needed. Because it's I don't know if like folks know the statistics for like foster youth and like adoption and all these different things in the U.S. Like it's kind of it's not kind of it is sad that like, and you couple that with this idea of like even reproductive rights, how like literally there are
Mm-hmm.
states trying to force people to have force people to have kids or give birth, but our foster care system, the U.S. foster care system, adoption system, is not like
Equipped. It's
it's
not
not
equipped.
equipped at all.
Mm-mm.
And to yeah, like the adoption statistics are abysmal. The resources for adoption system is abysmal. Foster care system is abysmal. And then even to the work that you're even doing, the opportunities, the experiences, everything that they need, the resources, support post that, because oftentimes Black and Brown youth age out of the foster care system,
Yep.
and then they're just literally left to fend for themselves. And you're like, all right, good luck. It's just, and so
They're
yeah,
given a plastic bag, they put in their belongings, and it's like, good luck, see ya,
that's
bye.
just
And
yeah,
yeah, there's no job resources, there's literally nothing. And so, like we were talking about before, they're taking any job they can get, they're doing
yeah,
whatever they can just to survive,
yeah,
and it's unacceptable.
absolutely unacceptable. And so yeah, so this y'all, I'm not gonna dive into. We're not gonna dive into stats. Look up the stats, like legitimately, like look up employment stats, look up like education stats, look up like even when foster care youth go into like school, all these different things. You will be utterly shocked. And it'll probably change. Yeah. Anyways, I'm not gonna get to that. That's another
Mm-hmm.
soapbox. But
Yep.
it's just like it's wild. So truly, truly, thank you for the work that you're doing, Grace. It's incredible. I would love to ask you one final question before we wrap up. What are you excited to share with the world? Like, what is the inclusion initiative like building, creating that you're really excited to put out into the world now? That's already in the world, soon, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the inclusion initiative exists, but it's not yet fully launched. So I'm
Uh,
really excited for the platform launch. And I'm excited to invite, people with these lived experiences to join this professional community that's just for us, like built by us, right? And it's going to have job resources, professional development resources, a mentorship program. It's going to have skill building opportunities, all of these things on top of just being a place where you can be your complete, whole, true, full self, surrounded by others that just they understand. And I know what you're talking. I know you know what I'm talking about, Jonathan, when I say when you are sitting at a table with a group of friends and you don't have to explain any nuances of who you are because they already know, because they are that too. They get it.
Yeah. Yes.
And that is just such a tremendous feeling that we don't get a lot, especially in the workplace, if ever. And so this community is going to be an already existing network for you of professionals like that want to elevate you, support you, and just be in community with you and help you, right? Because we're all looking for these resources in all these scattered places. But this is really one place where you can get all of these things that I was looking for. And I could find one-off mentorship programs. I could find one-off maybe professional development opportunity for someone like me. But it took a lot of work and a lot of digging and a lot of piecemealing. And this is just making it accessible, efficient, easy, and really a place where you can have like long-lasting community. So it's being launched by the end of this year, and I'm really excited for everyone to see it.
Amazing. And that's the inclusioninitiative.com, correct?
It is, yes, the inclusioninitiative.com. Yes.
Cool. And if this is your identity, if you line up with that, you can sign up and join that wait list so you can join and get those dope resources. Also, if they want to support the work you're doing, are there any ways that they can do that? What's the best way to do that? Follow you? How do they give you money? All the things.
I like this part of the episode.
Yeah.
No, definitely follow me on LinkedIn. If you're really curious about some of the nuances, the storytelling, the deep issues that the Inclusion Initiative was born out of, follow me on LinkedIn because I do a lot of storytelling there. But also, I'm looking for folks who have these identities that are in the same position that I am, right? You are able to give back to our community because of the resources or network you now have. So I'm looking for professional coaches, even, therapists. I'm looking for people that can help with skill building or that work in companies that want to hire our community and specifically provide resources and opportunity for our community. So if you want to partner with the Inclusion Initiative in that way, please be in touch. And LinkedIn or theinclusioninitiative.com is the best way to get a hold of me. And also, I am wanting to just put one final plea out there for people with our lived experience to join this community in support of each other. Because the more that we come together, the more power we're able to provide for each other. And that's huge. That's huge in closing the opportunity gap. So especially if you're somebody that has resources or you need resources, we need all of you to join the platform so that we can really build this ecosystem.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again, Grace. All of those, like your LinkedIn bio, website, those things are going to be in the show notes, y'all. So just keep a lookout for that. Grace, thanks again for sharing your story so openly, so vulnerably. This is dope. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate you, Jonathan. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. Till next time. Peace.